Hey everybody, it's Scott from Heroic Studios Gaming coming at you again with another video. This time I'm going to be talking to you about the Star Wars Fantasy Flight games, the Star Wars Fantasy Flight role-playing games. This is a role-playing game that, Star Wars as a role-playing game has been out since 1987. Trick. I bet you didn't know that. Yeah, it started out in 1987, and it was originally created by Weston Games, the original D6 Star Wars, the one that everyone sort of references as like the correct one or the old one or the right one. And then they went on till like 1999, so it was like 12 years under their control before it got handed over to Wizards of the Coast, who made the D20 version, which is the version I played a couple of times when I was younger because that's when I was getting involved in role-playing games. And it went from 2000 to 2010 with Wizards of the Coast, and then eventually landed in the lap of Fantasy Flight Games because board game companies, why not? I mean, they're pretty good. They have a lot of money. They have a decent amount of money, so they probably just could afford the rights to keep doing it. Wizards of the Coast could have too, but I think at the same time, 2010 is when they did a bunch of their stuff, and that's when they changed hands. So they probably couldn't afford it anymore. So they gave the licensing to Fantasy Flight Games, and Fantasy Flight Games then proceeded to be really dumb about it. I'm not saying that they're really dumb. I don't think the game is dumb. The game's actually pretty good. But I'll explain some of the dumb decisions that they made. Firstly, Fantasy Flight Games is a board game company and does not understand how digital distribution works, and so they actually do not support the Star Wars Fantasy Flight RPG, the Star Wars RPG in digital format. You can't really find it in digital format. If you're going to buy it, you're going to buy it in physical format. That's kind of how they feel because, I don't know, board game companies, I guess. Those terrible, evil board game companies that potentially are partners with me. You know what I mean? Like it's like a thing. But anyway, the digital distribution, and to be fair, Mike at Rock Manor Games, he actually had absolutely no clue how to do this digital distribution until I explained to him how Drive Through RPG works, and then he tried it out and was like, "Oh, this is amazing. Why have I not been doing this for stuff?" And I'm like, "I don't know." And so Drive Through RPG made it easy, but Fantasy Flight doesn't want to do that, so it's just not really supported digitally. So you're only going to find pirated copies of PDFs, but that's neither here nor there. The other thing they did is they're like, we're going to make our own dice. We're not going to use dice that everyone else can use. We're going to make our own dice, and that's going to be a thing. And everyone's going to have this barrier to entry where they have to learn our dice symbols and how they work and stuff like that, and that's going to be complicated. So, hooray. Okay. And then the other thing they decided to do is they're going to break it up into 3 games. They're just going to make one game where you can do everything you want. No, we're going to break it into 3 games. And I watched a YouTube video where somebody said, well, they did that probably to make money. That was their opinion. And that's probably not true. That's probably part of the decision-making process. But I actually think that it was actually a better idea to do it that way because if any of you have ever played the earlier Star Wars editions, you know that the Star Wars role-playing game is sort of flawed in one regard, and that is when you put regular people into the same scene as a Jedi, the Jedi is just too powerful. Look at the movies. The movies make a pretty good example of the Jedis being essentially badasses, right? We get it. We've seen, especially the newer movies, and by newer movies, I mean, the prequels and the newer sequels, right? And, the Jedis are kind of crazy with their abilities to do stuff, whereas they were less powerful necessarily in the 70s and 80s, but, The point is the RPGs often have the Jedis being way more powerful than everyone else, so you can't have somebody who's just a common average everyday pilot trying to deal with a Jedi in a fight scene because the Jedi's gonna waste him with the lightsaber. And so separating the games so that there were basically 3 separate games where you have a game called Edge of the Empire, which is essentially about the smugglers and the bounty hunters and the people who deal with the Hutts and colonists on random planets, and then a couple of years later, so that was in 2012 that came out. Then a couple of years later, in 2014, coming out with Age of Rebellion, in which you dealt with rebels and freedom fighters in the Empire. And then finally in 2015 releasing Force and Destiny. It gave them time to work on how to balance out Jedi so that they don't just completely massacre everybody, but also separate them in different games so that if you were going to be playing in the Star Wars universe for a while, you were just going to be playing regular people doing regular people things, and then maybe get into the whole fight with the rebels and the Empire, and then maybe you get to play Jedi. If you were really sort of playing along, but then at that point in time, you're already used to the universe, and you can just get used to having these random powerful characters, and decide whether or not your group wanted to focus on Jedi stories. In which case, maybe not include Jedi at all. So I think it was smart to do it that way, honestly. But then they also released 2 more versions of it after that. Well, actually, it's really just Star Wars: Rise of the Separatists, which is the Clone Wars and dealing with Clone Wars stuff, which is more of a timeline book than an actual game, because it doesn't create any new characters. I don't think. I think it just creates more rebel-like people, and maybe stormtroopers. I think maybe in that one. But like, I mean, I guess if you wanted to play a game where everyone was stormtroopers, but Star Wars is pretty much a story about rebels, right? So I don't know, but whatever. But that came out. That's all I'm saying about that. But didn't really introduce a whole lot of newness. And then the other thing they came out with was Force Awakens, which obviously came out, for the Force Awakens. It was Rey right on the cover, right? But you know what? But the key right there is it says beginner game. Now, to be honest with you guys, I have this one, obviously. It's right here. And to be honest with you guys, it probably should have come out first. It's essentially the quick start, right? It is essentially the quick start for playing the Star Wars role-playing game. And the one thing I'll say is that I was introduced to this game in like 2015, right about the time that Force and Destiny came out. I was introduced to it 2015, 2016, somewhere in that neighborhood. And I was introduced by Amit Moshe, who is the creator of City of Mist. He was looking for people to play a Star Wars game. And I was like, yeah, let me jump in, thinking it was Star Wars D20. Oh boy, was I wrong. And so here I had this character that I made through like Roll20, and I had no idea what the heck I was doing. It's actually a pre-made character, if I remember correctly. I had no idea what was going on, and I really wish that at the time that I had taken time to like, create a character, because I went and bought the dice afterwards, but I really didn't know how to create a character. And then later on, I told somebody that I didn't know how to do any of the stuff, and they introduced me to the Genesis system, which comes from it, and the Genesis system sucks, in my opinion. But anyway, back to what I'm saying. So I was introduced to the system, and I really didn't know what was going on, and then I didn't take the time to actually learn it until recently. But part of the reason why is because it's really hard to learn when they don't do a very good job of explaining it, and they don't do a very good job of explaining it until this one. And so this book is just a condensed version. It's like 50 pages total or something like that. But like, to be honest with you guys, like it ends... let's see, there's gear right about here. So on page 33 is basically the end of it. Everything after this is just gear and like minions, right, or enemies, right? So it's like really just like a reference guide after that. So before that, so it's 30 pages. They have to condense the entire how to play this game and the universe of Star Wars in 30 pages. And they basically spend like 2 pages being like, listen, you know what Star Wars is, right? Yeah, you do? Okay. And then they're like a page of like, what is a role-playing game? Well, this is what it is. Now, anyway, back to like how to play this game. And so they spend like, 20 pages or so, because they do get into like character stuff. Like the last bit of pages there, we saw like Chewbacca and things. That was like the talents and stuff, and they talk about those. But they basically take about 10 pages or so and like, this is how you play this game. And that was what they probably should have come out with before, because I think that it would have made it easy for people like me who were just trying to pick it up to get involved, because they created their own dice, like I said, and that's a barrier to entry. People have to learn how to do this. They have to go, what do these symbols mean? This is not a number. I don't know. I'm not looking for 6s or 8s or something. I'm looking for kapows and wings with dots. And so, like, that probably should have been explained a little bit more succinctly in the very beginning. But anyway, I digress. I am not reviewing the individual books themselves, as I don't have them, because, again, I have to buy them physically, and they're all $70. Well, they're $65 or something like that, and I'm not going to pay $190 for a game that I rarely play, right? Instead, I'll either buy or steal a pirated copy off the internet, or I will pay the $30 for the quick start guide and learn it from there. So I'm not going to critique it too much. This quick start guide, critique that one, was really well done. So I'm just going to say that it was, it was very succinct, it was very to the point, and it comes with an adventure, which is actually the best part. It comes with an adventure that actually just sort of walks you through, so you could just pick it up as a game master and be like, I don't know how to play this game, and the adventure literally walks you through, like 5 minutes of prep, maybe 10 minutes of prep, sort of read through, get like the feel of how it works, because it's like a little different, because it literally handholds you the whole time. So you kind of have to get used to it, like going, oh, it's handholding me, got it. But after you get past that part where you're like, oh, it's handholding me, then you can literally just go flip page, read aloud stuff, have your players react to it, roll dice, do whatever, and like tell them what the outcomes of things are, and then flip the page, do it again, right? So that was pretty cool. So that's like the thing that was like the best part. So like, that's awesome. But I digress. So let's talk about this game. You create a character, and your character's in the Star Wars universe. You have you're going to have a bunch of stats, which are like, let me look at my notes real fast. Where are you? Stats. Well, they're called characteristics, right? It's brawn, agility, intellect, cunning, willpower, and presence. Yeah, that sounds like, all the stuff that you'd expect to find, don't you think? It's basically strength, dexterity, intelligence, charisma, wisdom, and charisma again. But like cunning, they say it's like wisdom and street smarts, and then willpower is like experience, or endurance and focus. So I mean, it's like con essentially. So willpower is con, and then cunning is wisdom is their version, right? But it's the same. It's the same thing you'd expect. So you have your characteristics, and then you have a bunch of skills, and the ranks are going to be between 1 and 6, and that's going to be your ranks in those things. So you're going to have 1 to 6 cunning, or 1 to 6 piloting mechs, right, or something like that, right? And that's how it's going to go, and that's it. That's everything you do. Now, in a typical dice pool system, right, you're going to take your dice pool, and you're going to be like, okay, I've got 6 in, or a 4 in piloting, or let's just go 3 in piloting and a 2 in astromechs or whatever, right? Like that kind of, like, or a 2 in agility and a 2 in piloting astromechs, like that kind of thing. That is not what you do in the system. That would be too easy. But see, they don't want to make easy decisions because easy decisions should be smart. They got to be dumb, and they got to make it harder for you to get involved in it. So they're a board game company, so they got to do things a little bit more complicated. So they decided to go like this. We're gonna have a bunch of dice, and they're all gonna mean different things. You have ability dice, proficiency dice, difficulty dice, challenge dice, boost dice, setback dice, and force dice. Right? Like we're just gonna make a bunch of these dice. We're gonna put symbols on them that don't mean anything, and then we're gonna tell people that you don't just add them all together. No, we're gonna get real complicated about it, and we're gonna add all these symbols and stuff. So let's talk about let's not talk about the symbols. Let's talk about the dice and how you figure out which ones to roll. So I just mentioned that, like, let's say you're doing a scene. Let's say we're gonna do the Han Solo shoots Greedo scene from Mos Eisley Cantina, right? And we're going to play that out. And we're going to say that I'm Han Solo, and there's a fictional Greedo out there that's going to get shot. So I'm Han Solo, and I'm a pilot, so I'm probably going to have an agility of 4, because, pilots need to have, like, good agility to pilot their ships. And I have a dump truck in space, a space dump truck. Or actually, I guess it's a space 18-wheeler. So I've got a space 18-wheeler, and I've done the Kessel Run, so I'm obviously a pretty good pilot, right? So we're going to say that I have an... of 4 in my agility, right? And then we're gonna say that, like, since this is a blaster thing, and agility is, ranged combat is also agility, so that works out great for me. This is a blaster thing, ranged combat light, right, for blasters. I have a 2 in that because I am not a world-class combatant, but I am trained. Like, I'm better than the average Joe. I have at least a 1. But we're going to say that Han Solo is probably a 2, right? He's probably done some shooting. He's probably not 3, which is like starting to get into soldier territory, right? And like 6 is like Jedi Force level of like shoots things blind kind of business. So we're not going to say he's that. So we're going to say 2. It seems fine. All right. So now we're going to figure out, okay, I got to go shoot him. I got to put a bunch of dice together. How do I do that? Well, if you read the descriptions of the dice, even in this beginner game book, the descriptions of what the dice do, you would think that you would be really confused and that you're going to have to add 2 for his abilities, for the skill, and then, because that's what proficiency dice is, the training and experience and the skills, right? And then you're going to want to do like these D8s for the different stat, because the stat's like, it's the ability of your character to do a thing. That is wrong. That is the wrong way to do it, and that is not how you do it. And I like the way that the beginner book explains it. It's just like a real quick and dirty example. It goes, all right, here's the deal. So with our Han Solo of 4 and his skill of 2, we're basically going to look at the two numbers and compare them. Whichever one's bigger, that's the ability dice that we're going to start off with. And we're going to make a pool of ability dice based on that. So we know that he has 4. I only have 3 dice, but I'll throw a 4th one in. So now this is my set of dice. This is my pool that I've created based on simply the agility of the character alone. So we're like, all right, cool. That's the agility. That's the 4 ability dice. That's what I've got, because that's my higher of 2 numbers. If the 2 was higher, I would have 2, but it isn't. It's the lower number, right? So I've got my 4. Now, the 2 in my skill plays a factor in to suggest that I have some training and experience. I have some proficiency. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to drop 2 dice out of this set, because they're not going to, because they're going to be upgraded. I'm going to upgrade those 2 dice from the D8s to the next upgraded die, which is a proficiency die, which is a D12. And that's it. That's how I've created my pool. This is my my abilities based on my stat, and then my abilities based on my skill and stats. So that's what happens. So now my dice pool is now these 4 dice, 2 yellows, 2 greens, based on my Han Solo is a really good pilot and is going to shoot his blaster. That's my dice pool so far. Pretty simple, right? I think so. And now we just have to figure out how difficult of an action it is to shoot somebody across the table from me, right? So the game master might say that that's an incredibly difficult task, but let's be real, it's probably not. Shooting somebody across the table from me is probably only a difficulty 1, right? Okay, difficulty 1, sure. So now I add a difficulty die, because that's what this means. This is a difficulty die, so I have 1 die. If it was a difficulty 2, I'd add 2 dice. If it's difficulty 3, I'd add 3 dice to my pool, right? But it's not. It's difficulty 1, so we're going to go ahead and put that in my pool. So now I've got that in my pool here, and I've got all these dice in my hand, which you can't really see because I'm not holding them up to the camera, but you can see. That's what I've got going on. All right. Well, are there any other factors at play here? Any other factors at all? Sure. Let's say that Greedo, he's prepared for fight. He has his gun out already, so we're going to go ahead and say that he's prepared for fight, and so he's probably going to be dodgy, right? He's probably going to be watching for me to reach for something or, whatever. So we're going to go ahead and say that you have a setback dice. So the GM is going to say you have a setback dice. Now, it's called the setback dice, but really it should have been named disadvantage. That's what it is. That's all it is. It means that there's a disadvantageous situation going on right now, hence the disadvantage dice. We're going to go ahead and throw that in there because Greedo is probably ready for a fight. But we're going to say, but I'm pretty smooth, and I've been smooth talking him. I'm distracting him with my words, and I'm doing this thing where I keep leaning back and all kinds of stuff. So the game master's like, all right, fine. You can have a boost die or advantage die. I don't know why they call it a boost die. It's advantage die because they named the symbol advantage. That's why. They couldn't call it advantage die or disadvantage because they named the symbols these things. So now I've got this in. So now I've got this giant pool of dice right here, which was made up of some of my abilities, some of my skills, some of the difficulty, and some of the situation. And that's my dice pool. I'm going to roll that and look for symbols. And these symbols I'm looking for are those symbols. That's what I'm looking for. I want to get successes, and successes are what I need to accomplish the task. The more successes I have, the better, and then everything else really doesn't matter. I'm just kidding. No, failures matter. So the way that it works is essentially it's a game of advanced rock, scissors, paper. It's actually basically tic-tac-toe, but with like couple different axes. There's essentially 4 axes. There's a positive and negative axes, and you've got on your positive side, you've got your success and triumphs, or your success and advantages, and triumph is just an extra. It's a special. It's a success and advantage, right? That's the easiest way to think of it, is a success and advantage. It gets a little fuzzy as to what it does when you have certain other situations happening, but basically it's a success plus advantage in one symbol. So my top positive numbers or symbols are success and advantage, and then on the other side, the negative side, I've got failure and threat, which are my negative ones, and despair is the negative version of triumph. That's all it is. It's just a combination of failure and threat in one symbol. So that's what I'm looking for. What I want to do is I want to get more of the successes than I do failures. I don't care about threats and I don't care about advantages for the determining of the success of my action. I just need to figure out the success versus failure. If I have a net number of successes over the failures, I succeeded. If I have a neutral or more failures than successes, I failed. It is that simple. All the rest of it just determines what other weird narrative stuff is going on in the situation. So on my roll right now, I have four successes. So that's 4 explodies. 4 successes. I have 2 failures. That's 2 of the weird symbol, black symbol things there. The little V things or whatever. And so I have a net of a net of 2 successes. So I succeeded on my action. Now we can look at what the other things are and determine what other things happen, because this game is a whole lot of yes and, yes but, no and, no but. That's essentially what it is. It's a whole bunch of game with other things happening at play. So my successes, as I just explained, my successes and my failures cancel each other out. So the failures cancel out successes. Well, can you imagine that the threats cancel out advantages? You would be right if you had that imagination and you could think of that, because that is true. So the threats and the advantages cancel each other out to determine whether or not there is an and or but, right? Like yes and something good, or yes but something bad, right? That's essentially what is happening here, because I succeeded. Now, if I'd failed, it would be you failed but something good, and you failed and something bad happens as well. And that's what the advantage threats are all about. So in this case, I have 1, 2, 3, 4 advantages on this dice because I did really well. So I have 4 advantages, and I only have 1 threat. So assuming that that sort of worked out where they cancel just 1 off, I still have 3 additional advantages. Now, the advantages can play out a bunch of different ways, but the easiest thing to do is like remove any strain that I might have, which is a mental, like I have essentially wounds for physical damage and then strain for like mental damage. I could remove some strain that I've got. But one of the other things is that I can do is sort of hand this off to some other people and sort of create weird narrative events. Like let's say I succeeded at killing a stormtrooper and fleshed out his friend from behind cover, so I can give one of these cool advantage dice, because they named it advantage, so I can't call it advantage, just this boost dice to the next person in the combat on my side and be like, yo, buddy, I fleshed him out for you. When you roll, go ahead and roll one of these guys with it. And if they have their own situation where they can add a second one, they might be rolling with 2, right? But they're going to be having 1 for me. And that's what those advantages can be used for. Stuff like that. Just create these sort of narrative situations of how it benefited whatever was going on. The other way is it could have been threats. Let's flip it. Let's say I had more threats than I had advantages. So I did shoot the stormtrooper, but something bad happened, some sort of negative situation, right? But I ended up shooting the control for the computer, and now the platform we're on is like going away from where we want it to go. We're now moving away from that, or yes, but I gave away my position, and now the stormtroopers know where I am, and so now I'm gonna have like additional, like now when I go to do like my next action, I'm actually gonna have 2 of these setback dice, right? Or maybe in this case, maybe when I shot Greedo, I actually, like everybody in the cantina saw me. Now every social interaction I have in the cantina for the rest of the time I'm in there is going to be bad, and maybe somebody is calling the stormtroopers, right? There's some sort of negative thing that's happening right now, and I need to get out of there. And that's sort of how this game works. It's very simple in that regard. Now the despair and the triumph are essentially like the doubles, right? So if I had any triumphs, then I would have been like I succeeded and got an advantage. Or there's like a positive outcome definitely happening right now. And then the other way around, if I had gotten a despair, it would have been like, that's a failure, and that'll cancel out one of the successes. But also, something really crazy is going on, and you need to get the heck out of there. So there's that. Now, just like I upgraded, so just to be clear, just because like I upgraded the one of the green dice to this one, I can actually upgrade if the game master uses like the dark destiny points and whatever. I can upgrade one of these purple guys to one of these red guys, which is essentially the upgraded version. That's all that is. So now you know what all the dice are. Oh, the force dice. This is just a die that you use to determine how much destiny you start the game with. That's it. It's really not used for anything else. Maybe in the force and destiny one, it's actually used for something, but I don't think so. I haven't read anywhere where it's actually used for anything other than just at the beginning of the game determine how many destiny points the players get to use at the start of the game for the rest of the game to do stuff. And so, bam, that's how it all works. It's just like that. You've got the force, the light, dark side force die. You've got your success, failure, which are like binary. It's yes or no. Then you've got your advantage and threats, which again are yes and no. So they just add to this situation. And then you've got your triumph and despair, which just add to like the outcome of whatever's going on, like whatever big sort of things are going on in the background. That's it. Very, very simple game system. It doesn't seem like it from the outset, but it really, really is. And so that's the whole game in a nutshell. And like I said, once I started learning it, I was like, what the heck? Why didn't I learn this before? It's actually really not complicated. And now I can play any kind of Star Wars-y type thing that I want, not having to go back and read books that are now out of print. Instead, I have to go get books, pirate them because they're out of print. Now I've got to pirate them because the company that makes the game doesn't want to have them available digitally. Anyway, that's really it about the Star Wars RPG. It is actually pretty cool. I have played it, like I said, and I actually have run it because I got this Force Awakens and I ran the adventure, so that was pretty fun. And, you know, it was like, maybe it was a little rocky for sure at points when I'm like, hold on, let me read a thing while we get through this. But like, you know, the characters are motivated by various different things, and they sort of push themselves forward in the universe, which is very typical for Star Wars. And then you have these sort of narrative effects that are sort of built into the dice. It pulls the onus off of the game master to say, to like discuss failing forward and like failing, but something positive happens, or like you succeed, but then something, you know, that you didn't like happened as well, and sort of takes the onus off of forcing the game master to sort of create those situations to keep the plot sort of moving, or to not just move the plot, but to like make the situation interesting. How do we make it dramatic without forcing the game master to be a halfway decent game master? How do we make it so that even if the game master is just mediocre, the game is still super fun and people want to keep doing? Let's build the narrative into the dice. And let's put the onus on sort of the players to determine whether or not they succeed at shooting Greedo in the Mos Eisley Cantina, and you know, get noticed by people around, right? And so that's what they did, and so I actually will give it 2 thumbs up, because I will say that, despite the fact that there were all those cons that I mentioned before. Because once you get past all of those things, then it's actually pretty good. But I guess I'll give it 1 thumb. You know, I'll modify it. I'm going to modify it and say 1 thumb, because the game system is great, but 1, which could have been a thumb, but I'm going to take it away because, you know, a lot of the decisions on building the game were making it very unapproachable for new people. So like you essentially have to be experienced in role-playing games to be able to start playing this role-playing game. Like you're not going to be like, hey, I like found out Dungeons and Dragons is a thing and I love Star Wars. I'm going to jump in and play this Star Wars game. You are not going to do that, because you're going to be like, what the heck is going on? I don't understand. Why do I have all these crazy numbers? What are these dice? Why do I have to buy special dice? Why can't I just have any other dice that I could just have everywhere that everyone talks about on TikTok? Why can't I just have those dice? So that's what I'll say. That's my opinion on it. It would have 2 thumbs, but they made some bad decisions, and they really should support their books digitally. Just my opinion. Anyway, that's it for me. I hope that this enlightened you, and maybe you thought it was cool. Maybe it sucked. Let me know. Tell me about it, and we'll see you again, maybe on the, you know, in a galaxy far, far away, for all I know. See you guys later.